we're going to talk about getting ready to do assignment 3, which is the one that uses conditionals and some other features. So first of all, the setup is that assignment 3 is going to build on top of assignment 2 using the same basic scenario. So to get started, you can just save the workbook that you used for assignment 2 under a different name and use it for assignment 3, making sure it's macro enabled. Now you're again going to have a model ice cream order application to follow along with, and I'll do a video that shows you step by step how to create it. But let's talk a little bit first about how to prepare and get ready. So remember, writing the code is actually the third step of the process, not the first one. So what you need to do is, first of all, look over the statement of the assignment carefully and review the requirements and make up some use cases and tests. You'll need at least 5 or 6 tests to do a good job because there's a lot of options. Now you can't do every combination of options, but you could at least do every option by itself, no options, the ones that can be combined, do some combinations, that kind of thing. So you get a good spectrum and you make sure there's no weird problems going to happen. Then the next thing you want to do is think about the process of how your program's going to work through this and come up with the answer. And a good way to get started is to just work through a couple of examples by yourself on paper, which you'll have to do anyway to find out what the answer should be for the test, what the correct answer is. So, pay attention as you do it. And, okay, first I do this, then I do that. And that'll help you start to organize what the program's going to do and how it's going to do it. So that's requirements. And then we want to think about the specification. And, once you've done your tests and you've worked through them, you're ready to actually make either a flow chart or at least a list of the major steps. Now, a lot of people don't like to do a whole flow chart every time, and that's fine. You don't have to. But at least list out the major steps that you're going to do. And actually, a nice way to program is to start out by putting in comments that represent those major steps and then filling them in as you go along. You will need to hand in one piece of a flow chart for this assignment, and that's going to be for the conditional that controls what happens with the option buttons. Now there's examples of these things, the use cases, the tests, everything you have to hand in. There's examples of those posted so you can have a look and see what you need to do. Alright, now you're ready to write the code, and the first thing to say is it's a huge mistake to try to write all the code and then try to debug it. Because you have a ton of code, if you get a bug, you're not sure where it is, the test gets the wrong answer, but which part of it is wrong. It's much better to go step by step, write one small piece, get that working, write another small piece, get that working, and so on. And that way, if a bug shows up, it's most likely in the code you just wrote. So you don't have to hunt through it through an entire big program. If you get a runtime error, VBA will try to tell you what the problem was, and you can click on the debugger, and it'll try to show you where it actually happened. So a lot of times those are useful, sometimes they're not, but another thing you can do if you have an error is to step through and see where it happens. Now be sure to give yourself enough time to write this code. We're giving you 2 weeks this time instead of 1 week. Things may go well and you may not need all the time, but sometimes you come up with a hard to find bug and you might need it. So don't wait till, a week and a half from now to start it. You need to start this one early, and it's common to get a hard to find bug or two. Also, there's a bunch of extra credit things you can do, and you want to give yourself enough time for that. You go ahead and use the TA and the message boards to ask questions if you run into problems. But one thing, please don't post huge chunks of code on the message boards. We want everybody to figure things out by themselves. So if you need to have somebody look at your code and you can't get to the TA, you can email it to the TA or the instructor and they'll look it over for you. But first try to figure it out for yourself. That's the way you learn. Okay, now we're using a few new tools in here. One is the user form initialize function. it's similar to Workbook Open. It's an event routine that's called when the form shows up, when it's loaded into memory. So we're going to use name constants to define the various prices for, say, the different options that are available with the option buttons or the check boxes. We'll complete those labels at load time, basically because it's much better to only have the information in one place and everybody pulls it from that one place. So if you ever want to change it, you can, and it's easy. We're doing a little bit of formatting. So we're using the format function to format the tip percent as a percent, and so it'll take 0.15 and write it as 15 with a percent sign. And we're also using the currency format, which will take an amount and show it as currency. So for most of you, it's going to be with a dollar sign. Now, if you bought your computer in another country, it may not use actually a dollar sign. It may use whatever, euro or yen or what have you, depending on the country where you bought it. That's okay. You don't have to change your computer if you don't want to, as long as it's some kind of currency. Now, we talked a little bit the last time about how in a well-written program, user mistakes are caught and the user gets a chance to correct them. And often, actually, this kind of code is a huge part of the program. It could be more than half, actually. That's not unreasonable. We're going to make a tiny start on it this time, but we will catch the mistake if no option is selected among the options. So this should be price. And so here's what the code looks like for my if statement for the option buttons. So I have three flavors, vanilla, chocolate, and strawberry. So I check for each one if its option button has been selected. And if none has been selected, I have an else case. And I use a message box that comes up on the screen and says to the user, you need to select a flavor. And then, after the user presses the OK button on that, this jumps out of the subroutine. Exit sub will jump it out. So the user actually gets a chance to start over. It jumps out of the subroutine that processes the button click, but not out of the running program. So the user can go back and check off whatever they want to and then press the button again. And that's a reasonable way to use this to handle this kind of error in this particular case. Alright, so in the next video, I'll start with the first phase of doing the programming.